Good morning, Congressman. So, thank you so much for being here. So now you mentioned that you just returned from Taipei with other members of the congressional delegation. So tell us what happened there.
Well, this was actually a trip to more than just Taiwan. We went to Japan, we went to Okinawa, we went to Taiwan, and then we went to South Korea. And this was with my House Appropriations Committee, Subcommittee on Defense. So we're responsible for the entirety of our defense budget, which is almost half of our total budget. And so this is obviously a critical subcommittee that I now serve on. And we obviously have critical interests and challenges in the Indo-Pacific that are really most acute when you get to countries like Japan, Okinawa, Taiwan, South Korea. They're right on the front lines with North Korea, which shot off a ballistic missile during our trip. Obviously, China is right there. And so this is about how are we doing? How is our military doing? Are we postured? Do we have what we need? Are we working with our partners and allies there as well as we can? And so it's a very, very intense trip, but a very valuable trip too.
And so how are we doing, especially in particular with Taiwan and the China relations?
Well, first of all, there's many things that are much better than they were even a year ago. We have Japan and Korea, for example, that have not gotten along very well historically, and we need them to get along much better. And as we were on our trip, the head of Korea was visiting Japan for the first time in many, many years. And so the alliances that we have out there, the partnerships, whether it's our military to military, or we met with the president of Taiwan, a very, very impressive person, to strengthen those bonds that whether they are, obviously here in Hawaii, those bonds go beyond just economic and, defense. These are us. People here are from those countries as their ancestral homelands. And so it was a very necessary trip, I guess I would say that, and they were very happy that we were there.
So now at home we have several environmental concerns, of course. Top of mind, diesel fuel spill on top of Haleakala, and then of course the defueling of Red Hill. Now both have challenged our notion of transparency. So what is your view on that?
My view is that the military has not been transparent enough with us, and they have to be transparent with us. And every single action, every single spill, whether it had to be reported at the time or not, needs to be reported. I think in the defense of our military, they are much better at transparency than they were 1 to 2 years ago, when it was there was not enough transparency. And where you don't have transparency, that breeds distrust. And so when you've got distrust going, when you have a crisis like Red Hill, and you all have to work it through together, people don't trust each other on either side, and that's a very, very difficult situation to be in. So the move towards greater transparency, which frankly the congressional delegation said to the military, you have to do this. We're not asking you to do this. Everything disclosed, everything up front, so we know exactly what's going on, so the people of Hawaii know what the challenges are. For example, why does it have to take more time than any of us really want to defuel Red Hill? There's a very good reason for that. But if you don't have basic trust, when you make the explanation that we have to go through all of these steps to assure safety, you're not going to be believed. And so this is really necessary stuff, and I think it's going pretty well.
So how do you really hold them accountable, and what kind of standards will you possibly be implementing?
Well, I have the obligation and right and ability to hold them accountable in 2 major ways. First of all, I oversee in Congress everything that they're doing. So this is one of my #1 priorities, has been for several years now. Every day I'm thinking about what are they doing on Red Hill. The second way I hold them accountable, and this is back to my trip to the Far East, is that I have control of their budget, their entire budget, so not just their Red Hill budget, the budget of the military. I'm one of the few members in Congress that has direct control, direct oversight of that. And so, I have the ability to say, well, look, I have these expectations of you in the areas that are really critical to my communities, and I expect you to, get it done.
So now, in regards to Red Hill again, the IRS said that it may have emergency tax assistance. Now, you said a letter expressing your concern about this. So what has happened since then?
So this letter was about when Red Hill occurred, many families were displaced. They had to go to hotels. They had to go other places for months So they didn't have access to their homes. And so they were getting something of value, right? Which was a place to stay in a hotel, in some cases, dislocation expenses. And the IRS came along and said, that's taxable. And we said, that's not right. This happened to them through no fault of their own. They should not be taxed on us helping them with a dislocation that was caused by our military. And so with my colleagues, we wrote to the Internal Revenue Service and said, can you fix this? And I think that they're working through that question, and I believe that they are going to get it fixed. If they don't get it fixed, then we will get it fixed.
Now, we just saw that this week that you saw the protections for endangered native Hawaiian birds. So why is this so important right now?
Well, we have to protect our natural resources. We have to protect our aina. We have to protect the species that we are responsible for protecting. And in Hawaii, we have one of the highest levels of endangered species in the entire country. In fact, if you take a look at all of the species in our country that are considered endangered, so they are at risk of extinction, almost half of them are right here in Hawaii. And so I feel a special kuleana to protect these species. And why is that important? Well, first of all, it's our obligation. Second, as any one species goes extinct, that has a ripple effect all the way through our entire environment. So it's not just a matter of the honey creepers. It is a matter of the forest ecosystems. And so this is something that we need to try to help. And as a member of the Natural Resources Committee, I have jurisdiction over that part of our federal government, and I try to pair that up with my Appropriations Committee to make sure that we're doing the right things and that we are funding the right things also.
So now you've been appointed to the vice chair to the Problem Solvers Caucus. Now, described as a bipartisan entity that tackles our toughest challenges. So what kind of work are you doing within that committee that you can share?
Well, this is a very, very unique caucus that I'm now in the leadership of. It was started 4 or 5 years ago to cut through the division and the yelling back and forth from both sides. And unfortunately, in Congress nowadays, what we have is this side yelling and this side yelling, and nobody really here between all of that yelling trying to get problems solved. And so the caucus was formed, equal number of Republicans and Democrats. That's a requirement of the caucus. And our job is to go out there and try to figure out what are the really, really difficult challenges that we're facing. I'll just name you a couple. Immigration, the debt ceiling, deficits in debt. We have a couple of other challenges where it's just really, really hard to get them done. And people are busy yelling and screaming at each other. And so our commitment is to see what we can do together to make government work. Because if there's any one thing that Americans are truly united on, it is they want their government to work. They want their government to solve the problems. Nobody likes Congress yelling at each other and screaming at each other and not getting anything done. So this is a commitment by me in my office to try to work to get these things done. Doesn't mean I'm not going to go out there and have disagreements as a Democrat, as somebody who has philosophical disagreements on some of these issues with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We're still going to have those debates and disagreements, and we'll have to vote, and that's democracy. But democracy is not about every single thing has to be that. Democracy is about solving problems, and if we can't get that done, then we're not doing what we need to do in government. So I'm going to try to fix that.
So any specific things that you're working on that will be reflected in that committee and back here in Hawaii?
Well, we have something called the debt ceiling, which is hanging over all of our heads
exactly,
right now.
all of us.
That is a major question for us, which is, are we, as a country, going to default on our borrowings? We've never defaulted before. We've never failed to pay back people that have lent our country money, whether it's citizens buying bonds or foreign countries, or others investing in our financial instruments. They all do that because they consider the United States to be the best investment in the entire world. And if we default on that, it changes a whole range of issues. So we cannot default on our debt. And yet this is one of those issues where people are yelling and screaming at each other about. So I'm way into that right now with the problem solvers.
Mahalo, Congressman Ed Case. It's such a blessing to have you here and appreciate you taking your time. Really, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, and welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll be right back after the short break. Stay with us.